leadership lessons to help you bring your mission to life. Here's Mindy Audlin and Stacy Collins.
A healthy culture is a thriving culture. I'm Mindy Audlin.
And I'm Stacy Collins.
Yeah, and in this episode of The Leading Edge, we are going to explore 5 elements of a healthy, engaged community and how to build culturally nourishing practices into your growth strategy for your organization, for your community. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
I'm ready. Let's do this. Now, for those of you who are new to this, you got to know that whenever Stacy and I are together, we always start with a check-in. It's sort of that small group mentality that's ingrained in us. So check-in for today is really kind of a review of what we did in our last episode. So in our last episode, we focused on mission and purpose. And today we're going to talk about culture, and I'm going to share with you the 5 C's of a healthy, thriving culture. But there is actually, Stacy, this is the first time I've ever put it out there, but I do believe there might be a 6th C.
Oh, the hidden 6th C.
The 6th C. Everybody's been wanting to give me the 6th C.
Oh, a mystery revealed today.
Mystery revealed today. I know. So the 6th C, I have come to believe that the 6th C is clarity. And clarity is what we talked about in our last episode, focusing on clarity of your purpose, clarity of your mission, having people know why you're doing what you're doing. What is it? What is the glue that is bringing you together? What are you here to do together? And that sense of clarity is step 1. Today, in this episode, we're going to talk about once you have that clarity, what do you do to build a healthy culture around it? But before we get into that, Stacey, what's your check-in? What have you been thinking about this past week as it relates to getting clarity on your purpose, clarity on your mission?
Yes, I loved our conversation last week on creating a mission statement and what makes them work and what we can do to kind of tweak them to help them allow us to fulfill our purpose. And one of the biggest ahas for me last week is back to grammar school, action verbs, the power of action verbs and having those in our mission statement so that we can have a statement that we actually can use to implement our strategy and use to bring our mission into life. So that was my big takeaway from last week.
I love that. And, the other thing that I love, I love verbs. I love active verbs. Now, here's the thing that I've seen in our movement is once we get to how much fun it is to pick the verb, then we want to pick lots of verbs because there's so many good verbs. We want to transform and create and build and eradicate bad things and all these things we want to do. So for me, the clarity piece is really honing it in and saying, if you could pick one verb, and this is true whether it's your mission statement for your organization or for your life, if you could pick one verb that you would wrap everything you do around, what would it be? And that when you boil it down to that one word, one active verb, it's amazing how much clarity you can get about what are we really here to do.
Yes, clarity, focus, and helping you stay in your lane, what you're meant to do. Yeah. I love that.
So, of course, we would love to hear from you and your check-in. What are your takeaways and what are you finding in terms of gaining clarity personally or professionally within your organization or just in your own life? How is this showing up in your life? How is it showing up in your organization? And how are you using it? So you can post that. We have a Patreon community if you would like to support this broadcast with any level of donation. That is at Patreon, patreon.com/SpiritGroups. We also have a page on Facebook, so you can go there and let us know what you think. Or Stacey, what else could they do?
They could call in and ask a question or share their experiences with us. And our number for that is 816-251-3555. We'd love to hear from you.
We do. We love hearing from you because this is really about what can we create together. And our purpose, as I created the Spirit Groups program, it really revolved around inspiring people to create infinite connections, infinite being connections with the infinite, but also infinitely connecting with each other. And that really ties into what we're going to be talking about today in terms of what is the culture? How do we connect with each other? So creating culture shift. And that's really at the heart of what we're doing here. For many of our New Thought leaders and our New Thought ministries, we are creating sometimes radical culture shift, moving away from a paradigm where it is the sage on the stage and moving into a paradigm where there are, and I love this. This is a Charles Fillmore term. So this was Charles Fillmore's early version, his vision of what a Unity Spiritual Center would be. And he said the goal, the intent of the leader needs to be the development of co-workers. Co-workers was his word. It was not this hierarchy of I'm the one with the degree. I mean, obviously, leadership is important. That's what we're here to talk about. But leadership with sort of a different level of consciousness. Leadership in terms of I am leading people to become co-workers in this mission that we have identified together. So I know you have seen some culture shifts happening through your small group program at Unity of Houston. Do you want to talk about that, what's happening, and the importance of it?
Yes, you read my mind. I would love to talk about that. And actually, I didn't know you were going to do that quote from Charles Fillmore, but I love that because that was going to be my first point that I wanted to talk about. Is that was sort of the first thing we saw happen is this whole layer of leadership we saw rising from within our community. When you talk about being able or willing to host a small group, all of a sudden people that we're just curious about it. It started off with a little bit of curiosity. And when we trained them and showed them how easy it could be and how connecting it was, people just loved it. And as the time has gone on, there's such ownership in their group and the leaders don't have to do it alone, which I know we'll talk about as we go on. And the other piece that I've seen that has just been amazing, I call this kind of the part 2 of the culture shift, is in this past year when so many of us, or more than a year now, it's been about 15 months or so, have realized that the church has to be beyond its building. The church is not confined to the building. And how do we create church outside of it? Well, we can have our Sunday services online. That's wonderful. And Wednesday services. But it's been these small groups that have helped people stay connected to our community. We just had someone a couple of weeks ago do a testimonial about the spirit groups in our church. And she said, over the last couple of years, there's been things that have been happening in my own personal life. And then with the pandemic, it would have been easy for me to drift away. That's what she said. It would have been easy, but it wasn't because she was so plugged in with her spirit group. And these people kept her connected and it kept her tethered, she said, in a beautiful way to her spiritual community. So that's just some of what I've seen, Mindy. I could go on. But
I get chills. I literally have like little goosebumps or God bumps. I have those little chills because that is so, that is what engaged community is about, is when it is all about the building or all about the message. And that's the mistake I made when I first came into ministry. And, I would look at the attendance and I would think, okay, so my job is to get people here. My job is to build this community and to make it a thriving, healthy community. That's my job. That's when the minister takes on the mission and not the community takes on the mission. And that was definitely my mindset. And so for me, there was so much pressure to be more entertaining, to be funnier, to go deeper, to be a better speaker, to have better music, to have the most incredible, flowers. And like, what else can I do to engage people? And then here was my aha. There was a retired minister who was part of our community, who was a very dear woman to me and my mentor in every way except one. She gave me one bit of advice. She said, this was a community I walked into that loved doing potlucks. And she's like, oh, don't do potlucks. Potlucks are so much work. They're such a mess. Like, get rid of the potlucks. But I knew with this community, I can't get rid of the potlucks. I know they're a lot of work. I know they're a mess. And all that was racing through my head of get rid of the potlucks, because my mentor told me to, but I didn't. And what I realized, the harder I tried to be engaging on Sunday morning, the more I realized that they really weren't coming back because my talk was better this week than it was last week. I mean, I do think all that's important, that it's important that we have engaging leadership. But what I noticed is the reason they kept coming back is because of the potluck. It's because they got to talk to people and meet people, and it was easy to connect, and that gave them an immediate way to talk about the ideas that we've been focused on in the service. And so that was sort of my aha, that there is more, that this community that I'm, in charge of as a minister, as a spiritual leader, that really, what if the goal is not necessarily to be holding the weight of it all and the responsibility of it all, but really to go back to the metaphor we used in our last episode, but to be the captain of the ship, where everybody, I can help people identify what role do you want to play in helping this ship get from where we are to where we're going together. That is our mission. So today is about, what is the culture on that boat? What is it like? Is there one person trying to do it all? Or in a lot of ministries, it may be minister and staff, maybe a volunteer board. There's like a tiny, tiny group of people trying to do it all. Or have you created a culture where, yes, there's an opportunity for people to come in. Yes, there's an opportunity for people to explore and to get a sense of who you are, what you do. But there's also a very easy transition into, this is what Craig Groeschel from Life Church says, shifting from a consumer type of person to a contributor. Are you a spiritual consumer coming in to hear a great message and to soak up the music and the experience and say, wow, I feel better. That was great. I'm consuming the content. Or are you able to cross that line into becoming a spiritual contributor, which is where the mission of the organization is now a part of my mission. And I want to use my gifts and my strengths to be able to bring that mission to life. Because once you can make that shift, now it's a different energy and it's a whole different game. Now it's just a matter of, how do we get people in the right position doing the thing that is their spiritual gift, with all of us, moving this ship in the same direction. So that's where we are headed today. Kind of exciting.
It's really exciting. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love even the metaphor of the potluck, because in a potluck, it's not one person cooking everything, is it?
Yeah.
Everybody's sharing their gifts in their own unique way, right? That's how it happens. And there's more happening there, because I'm a converted potluck fan, I used to not enjoy them so much, but more happens when people get together and connect in a way like that.
And it was interesting because for all the work, it really, yes, it was a lot of work, but we all did it. And there's something about washing dishes with someone. There's something about wiping down tables with someone in a place that feels like home. And I remember I was maybe a month or two in. So I was green. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was out in the garden. It was on a Saturday and I was weeding. I was weeding the garden because I did everything, right? I'm responsible. I did everything. And as I was weeding the garden, this little girl comes around the corner and she introduces herself. And so I introduce myself and, I say, what's your name? And she tells me her name. And after she tells me her name, she says, this is my name and this is my church. And she came out to help garden. And it occurred to me that this was my church too. This is my church and I feel responsible for it. And here was this little girl and it was her church too. And she felt responsible for it. Oh. And when we have that kind of culture, then the challenges become, they don't seem so insurmountable. Like, okay, we have a challenge. So what do we do together to navigate through this rocky patch?
Yes.
Let's do this together. So today, I want to share with everybody, the 5 C's. And I've called this different things, the 5 disciplines of love, because these are all grounded in love. They're the 5 disciplines of creating healthy community, because a community that is built on love, that's the rock, that is the foundation for everything. So I'm going to share the 5 C's, and then we'll, of course, opening up the phone lines. If your ministry, your small groups have been using these and you want to share stories of this is how they've come to life in our ministry, this is how we're using it, then we'll open up for some callers then. Would love to hear your questions if you have any. But let's dive in, shall we?
Yes, ready. Okay. I'm ready.
Ready. All right. So I'm going to sort of tee it up, and then Stacy, you can jump in and kind of share how you've been implementing this at Unity of Houston, because you are the small groups program director for your small group ministry program. So the first C is communion, and communion is obviously in New Thought. Everything is built upon prayer consciousness. The fact that we turn within for answers first. That is the place that we go. And so communion is, it means that we are prayerful. It means that we recognize that we are able to commune with a higher power, and that we prioritize that. And so talk a little bit about what communion looks like in your small groups or in your ministry.
Yes, I love the communion C. I'm going to probably say that about all the C's, but communion right now, you're my favorite. But when I first started hosting a spirit group, this is the one that I found really to be a little challenging at first for a new host, because I would come in, who wants to pray us in? We'd want to start with prayer, and I'd get crickets. You could hear the crickets and kind of deer in the headlights. And so I really had to step back and ask, well, what does prayer look like? What does communion look like? It can look like a lot of different things. And once we started opening it up to share a reading that resonates with you, share a poem, a piece of music, a guided meditation, then people became a lot more comfortable with bringing something. And something you said, Mindy, actually, in one of our trainings about, it doesn't have to be the person that's already great at prayer to do your prayer. Sometimes the most powerful prayer comes from someone that this is their very first time praying in front of a group of people. And once you've created that level of support and people feel safe doing that, I've had transcendent experiences from people doing their first prayer in a space that they felt safe enough to do so. So yes.
I love that. And that safety that you talk about, that is part of the culture. And I think that's why you're going to hear me say it over and over and over again. That's why I truly believe small groups are an essential part of a healthy ministry, because you have to have a space where people feel safe doing that thing for the first time, and doing it, up on stage in front of 200 people. Not, that can be a little scary, but doing it in a living room with people who love you and support you and who know that it's your first time and are just like thrilled to be witness to you stepping in. I had one church tell me that they had a member who had been a member for over 25 years, had been a member of this New Thought community, and it was the first time she had ever prayed out loud in front of anybody. Was in her spirit group, was in her small group. I've also seen, I did a group with a family group, and we let the kids sign up. We had tons of kids, and we were trying to find jobs for everybody, because that's the culture. Like, everybody gets to contribute in some way or another. And the favorite job, the favorite role for our kids was, we had some musical kids, and they wanted to do a song for the opening prayer or for the closing prayer. So we had guitar music and singing and violins and readings and people that would do guided meditations that I had no idea they knew how to lead a guided meditation like that.
Right.
And it was,
yeah.
Wow, there's so much wisdom in the community that I would have never known if I hadn't gotten out of the way and said, who wants to lead? So,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. And it's just a great way to anchor the space. So yeah, it can be checking in on, here's something that I wrote. We've had people do that. So here's a poem that I wrote inspired by this group. And they do that as a, opening intention. Prayer, obviously, meditations, songs, lots of ways people can contribute in terms of communion and really grounding the space. So that's the first C. And as we go through each of these, I just invite you to check, do sort of a check, like, how are we doing in our community? Usually New Thought communities, we are all over this one.
Right.
Like, got this one down. Like, we will, you drop a hat, let's pray. So for a lot of your communities, I know this one is just natural. It's part of who you are. If maybe it's not the same since COVID or since pandemic or since, I don't know, since maybe you've hit some rocky times, and you got to remember, all right, let's start with it. Let's start everything with that communion space, and weave it into everything that we do. So that's the first C. The second C is connection, and connection this is so important, because connection is about being able to walk into your spiritual community and know that there's going to be a friend there. There's going to be a friendly face that is excited to see you, who is welcoming. That is, it's the spiritual journey can be challenging, and to have people that you can play with, that you can have fun with, it doesn't always have to be cathartic and heavy, that we can just enjoy each other's company, I think is kind of a lost art. And so we get to practice that in building healthy communities. So what does connection look like in your community, Stacy?
Yes, and this is one of the C's that I've really seen. That kind of works, right? Come alive on Sunday mornings when we do gather in person, because people that are in small groups together, they're greeting each other from across the lobby. They're sitting together in church. They're going out to lunch afterwards, and I staff the welcome table a lot in the lobby, so I've seen this with my own two eyes, that this has happened in such a dynamic way. And some people get in one small group and tend to stay in that same group, and that group sits together, and others, they like to group hop because they want to meet as many people as possible. And so you just have this whole network of connections that are happening from people that have been in a small group together at one point or another. So that's part's been absolutely wonderful.
I love it. And the biggest question I always get when I'm training ministries on how to do small groups is people will say, well, we're trying, we don't want people to go into their little, what's the word?
Click.
Clicks, like their little click. We don't want clicks. And people are so worried about clicks. But really, unless you want to be a church of 12 people, it's a really good idea to let people form cliques. A healthy clique versus an unhealthy clique. An unhealthy clique is the group of people that go and they find themselves in a little tiny corner and they don't talk to anybody else. And, they sort of have their own little tribe, and it's very exclusive. A healthy clique is when you walk into the church and you know somebody and they know you and they know what's going on in your life. That's important. That's part of building friendships. And you cannot build deep, intimate friendships with 150 people.
That's right.
Like it's just not going to happen. It's expecting too much of people. So allowing it, like, okay, we're going to have cliques, but we're going to build them intentionally. And this is, again, the beauty of small groups, because you have the ability to mentor your group leaders to make sure those group leaders, as they are building those relationships in their groups, that they are doing it in a healthy way, that those groups come together and they are not just high-fiving each other. They're inviting newcomers to come join their group. They're serving together. They're out in the community representing your ministry. They are socializing together. They are reaching out to newcomers and saying, are you in the Spirit group? Because they're amazing. Look how close we are. We would love for you to have this experience. When people are wanting to be inclusive around that connection experience, it is an incredibly healthy thing and a vital thing.
Yes, I agree. And it goes back to the mission too. When you, in the training part, when you're interacting with your host, that reminder that we're all here to fulfill the mission of the church, and in that connection, we can bring more people into it. And yes, a big shout out to my Unity of Houston hosts. They are amazing at connection. All of them.
Aw, I love it. And I have been, we are here in a new town. We moved through a pandemic. So, it's been a little challenging getting plugged in again. And one of the things that's become very clear to me is that there is power in one friend. If you have one friend, if you have one person who notices that you're not there, who misses you when you're gone, who checks in with you. I didn't see you at church today. I thought you'd be there. I didn't see you in our group today. Everything okay? That one person can make such a difference in terms of, do I stay engaged in this community or do I drift away? And I have had, this is kind of I have people tell me things. And I have people and it's because they're so hungry for this kind of culture. I had someone tell me, and this is from a very, what I would consider a very vibrant church. She said there was a natural disaster that went through her area, and she was affected, and she was homeless for a while and really struggled. Mm-hmm. And she said she was the hardest part for her was this church where she had been active for over a decade. Nobody reached out. Nobody called to see how she was doing. And she said, I understand they probably didn't know. They probably didn't know that I was going through this hard. She didn't call them. She's like, owning that. But the thing is, when you have a small group infrastructure, that doesn't happen. Nobody disappears for a month without somebody saying, hey, you're not gone for a week. People say, well, let's do small groups and do it every month. Like, no, if somebody misses a month, you might think, they just missed a month. And then it's 2 months and they've been suffering. When you have groups that meet every week, you're part of each other's lives. And if someone isn't showing up the way they normally show up, there's someone there to reach out. And it doesn't have to be the minister, and it doesn't have to be a prayer chaplain. It can be someone right there in their group. So have you seen that kind of thing happening?
Yes, and actually, I was going to save that juicy bit for the compassion one on our
No, let's
next.
go there. We'll go there because I know we're coming up on break, but I think let's touch on compassion and then we'll go deeper into it. So compassion is the third C, and this does tie into compassion a lot. Having that connection, those people that you can become friends with, opens the door really to being able to be there for each other and not feel like a burden and not feel like you're weighing each other down because you're always there for each other. It's a give and take, it's a flow. So compassion is about building relationships with each other and being there for each other in times when, uh, you know, it can be challenging. I mean, this past 18 months, who hasn't had some challenges in these past 18 months? So we're going to come back from break. And when we do, we'll talk about the application of compassion in a healthy community. Taking your calls, we would love to hear from you, hear how you're using some of these ideas, some of these tools in your own community. More C's coming up. So stick around. We'll be right back.